Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Mitch. Good Friday morning to you all. Hope you guys are doing well out there, stayed safe overnight with the crazy weather that was ongoing yesterday into the overnight hours. And we have some pretty strong storms out there this morning that will do nothing but intensify over the next several hours. And I think they will sort of maximize, if you will, over Kentucky, portions of Tennessee, maybe even North Alabama, maybe North Georgia, maybe even the upstate of South Carolina a little bit later this afternoon. We're going to break this down one last time for you guys as far as the severe weather part of this. This is the last day of it, and then a significant pattern change is on the horizon. And this isn't hype. This isn't me wish casting. You know, honestly, I'm not a big fan of March cold, but it's coming. There's a big pattern change that's going to start next week. And after we get past the day, that is going to be the main topic going forward, is trying to figure out how cold is it going to be, and what kind of storm systems do we have flying around along this cold air. This is kind of one of those patterns where you can get one of those crazy mid-March, pretty southern winter storms. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I'm starting to see with each model run just signs that something is coming. I mentioned, a few weeks back that even though the winter seemed dead, that I really thought something weird was going to happen in March, and that was just going off a gut feeling, which doesn't really mean much at all. But regardless, we're going to try to figure it out for you guys. But we need to focus in on today because it's going to be very active. A lot of people's going to be impacted by some nasty weather. If you folks have not subscribed, certainly consider doing that. Like the video if you like it. And if you guys got anything that I can pray about or pray over, you guys know the deal. Put it in the comments below. Let's get rolling. Water vapor loop. This is our powerful storm system that has that negative tilt now, which means it's strengthening. A lot of heavy precipitation moving into the Ohio Valley. And if you see these areas right here to pop up right there, that is storms already beginning to explode early this morning. And then a warm sector is going to rise all the way into Kentucky today, where moist air will build. In fact, you're probably waking up in Kentucky this morning thinking, well, it just feels kind of crisp outside. It doesn't really feel like severe weather's coming. But as you get going throughout your morning, you get your flow going, you'll notice that the atmosphere will shift in Kentucky throughout the next several hours into the afternoon hours. These storms will be fast moving the further north you go. But you can't discount the severe weather threat in the southeast today, okay? Watches and warnings. This mustard color right here, that's high wind warnings. Winds are already ripping out there this morning. They will do nothing but increase throughout Tennessee and Kentucky and areas of the southeast later. As we get into, deeper in the morning hours into this afternoon, you got flood watches still up for the Ohio Valley. Flash flood warnings ongoing in central Arkansas, areas of Missouri, and a couple counties in Indiana. Winter storm warnings up. This includes Detroit, includes all of southern Michigan and all of the northern sections, I guess you would say, of Indiana. I hate to lead you astray for you folks in Chicago. Y'all say what y'all got to say, but this just does not look like it's going to be a big event for you guys. They've dropped the snowfall totals over the last day. I thought the 4 to 6 inches last night that they were hanging on to for Chicago was kind of high in the National Weather Service. I think you'll be lucky to get a couple inches in Chicago. But remember, these precipitation fields, and I'll show you when we talk about the winter storm portion of this here in a second, sometimes can get further north than what models show. So, I do think you'll get accumulating snow in Chicago. I just don't think you're going to get a lot of it. Winter storm warnings up for all the interior northeast. Boston, you're hanging on to an advisory. If they're just not confident this is going to stay winter weather long enough for you to maintain a warning, to have a warning. So we'll talk about that here in a second. As of right now, and I'm going to update this, I'm talking 6:38 a.m. Eastern time. I do think this is going to change by the time a lot of you folks watch this. It happens a lot. The update normally comes about an hour after I drop the morning videos on a severe weather day. But right now you have an enhanced risk, basically stretching all the way through the Tennessee Valley, all along the entire Cumberland Plateau of Tennessee. It's for, northeast sections of Alabama, even for sections of northwest Georgia, including, Chattanooga, all the way up to Louisville, Lexington, Kentucky. And this is really driven off right now a damaging wind threat. You have a 30% risk to see damaging winds within 25 miles in a given location. You also have a 10% risk in this black outlined area to see significant winds pushing 65 knots or higher, which is hurricane force winds and miles per hour readings. Tornado warning. They still have that 5% risk up, but I'm telling you, I might be wrong. I could be. But I would guess that they're going to put a 10% risk up somewhere inside of this brown area, and I would guess right into here. that's going to cover sections of Tennessee and Kentucky. But there's a 2% risk of a tornado that stretches all the way through Charlotte, Columbia, all the way down to almost the panhandle of Florida, all the way up to Columbus, Ohio. So this is kind of one of those events, guys, where things could get kind of sneaky. I'm watching the upstate of South Carolina. There's many little areas that I'm watching. We're going to break this down. But right now, sorry, I'm just getting a little, I feel a little sneeze coming, a little hiccup action there. But right now, the dew points for the majority of Kentucky are either in the 30s, the 40s, or maybe the low 50s. But this moist air is rising north very quickly. It's already dominating the western half of Tennessee. You got dew points in the 60s. This will continue to climb into Kentucky, but it's a very moist air mass already in the deep south. I mean, it's humid, especially for March 3rd standards, and the atmosphere is building ahead of this ejecting low pressure. Okay, this will build all the way up, probably into the southern sections of Ohio. So you look at the storms right now. They are starting to build again. Nothing is technically severe as of right now, but these storms will, this is Kentucky up here, Lexington, Kentucky, Louisville, Nashville right here, Knoxville. These storms will have more of a motion just going like this, probably, and then kind of there'll be an area that kind of goes like this as the tilt changes, and then an area that kind of goes like that, maybe even eventually like that today. And there is going to be extremely strong winds in these areas. I say extremely, but just for a land low pressure, it's pretty wild. I mean, I'm talking about 70 to as much as maybe 80 mile per hour wind gust in certain areas. I'm not talking about sustained, but wind gust. But this is the line that's going to build, and we'll see if this breaks up. Any additional convection breaks out in front of it. That would be a dangerous scenario for sure. So let's focus in on Tennessee and Kentucky first. Here it comes. This line of storms begins to build. You're dealing with some, heavy rain this morning in Kentucky. This will clear out to the north as we're getting into about lunchtime. So I know I got Zulu time up here, but remember, you can look over here. I know it's kind of small to see on your screen because timing is big on this. And I'll back it up 1 hour. Back this up 1 hour, and that is your time in Central Time. So this is in Eastern Time. So this is 11 a.m. Eastern Time. So this would be 10 a.m. in Kentucky and Tennessee time. So these storms are whipping through. But look at these storms. This is the sector that builds, that warm, moist sector. That's basically the sector of ingredients that are going to be quite severe and supportive for some significant severe weather. Winds are howling already right here as we're getting into about 10, 11 a.m. Here comes these storms. They start to kind of blast through Nashville, I would say around lunchtime, give or take an hour. They're moving through western sections of Kentucky. This right around into here is going to be when this maximizes. These are fast-moving storms. They're going to be covering a lot of ground very quickly, and once they move through, the severe weather threat's over. It's not like you're going to have a storm in Kentucky or Tennessee, and then you're going to have a chance for more behind it. This is going to move through, and that's it. That's all she wrote. I thought about driving all the way up to Kentucky this morning, but I decided not to. It's kind of one of those things where you get one shot to catch something, and then that's it, because you're not really going to be able to chase down the fast motion of these storms in the hills of eastern Kentucky. I tell you that. But this is a nasty line of storms moving through. This is producing damaging winds. I'm talking 60, 70, maybe at times 80 mile per hour winds. Even outside, the storms are producing a lot of winds. But embedded in these little sections, these little kind of broken up line, and this gets really broken up to the south, you could have spin-ups. And if you do, guys, if you have an embedded tornado in these lines, and this is for 1 p.m. slashing right through central Kentucky and moving into eastern sections of Tennessee, if you have an embedded tornado, one, it's probably going to be rain-wrapped. Two, it's going to be coming at you very, very fast. So it's important that you pay attention to if your county gets under a tornado warning. You're no doubt going to get a tornado watch issued for Kentucky here in the next few hours. But pay attention if you get a tornado warning. Take it serious, because it's going to come up on you very, very fast. Okay? It's not guaranteed that there's an actual tornado warning on the ground, but treat it as if it is, right? So 2 p.m., look, this covers a lot of ground, blasting through Lexington. It's just moved through Louisville. This begins to knock on the door of Knoxville down here, Chattanooga, kind of moves into the valleys between the Southern Alps and the Cumberland Plateau. By the time you're getting into 3 p.m., this is beginning to start to see a little bit of daylight as it's moving through eastern Kentucky, but this is around 4 p.m. The last of these storms are moving through eastern Kentucky. Same kind of threat. These are moving into the southern Appalachian Mountains. This is going to produce some high winds in the mountains. If you're heading to the mountains this weekend, you're going to meet these storms head on, especially if you're leaving like midday today. You are going to hit some nasty weather for sure. But this blasts through and then that's it. What can you see with this? Well, these are winds associated with these storms. Starting off this morning, winds will begin to really pick up. For example, this is around lunchtime. Nashville, you're seeing 50 to 60 at times, 70 mile per hour wind gust. Okay, this begins to blast through Kentucky. Look at this. I mean, you see the 63 to 51. I mean, don't focus so much on that, but this is a huge, broad area, relatively speaking, of very strong winds about early afternoon, moving through Kentucky, moving through Tennessee, moving through everywhere. I mean, there's strong winds up here in Indiana, Illinois. I mean, you got 30 to 40 mile per hour wind gusts up here in Ohio, but really down here, there's tons of kinematics, meaning tons of available wind potential in the atmosphere to rotate updrafts very quickly. And this just really solidifies it here, where, I mean, from western Kentucky all the way to eastern Kentucky, same thing with Tennessee, west to east, strong 50, 60, 70 mile per hour winds at times, hurricane force wind gust ripping through these areas. That's why you have these high wind warnings. I mean, this is even at 6 p.m. You still have a corridor of very strong winds in Kentucky. And this finally simmers down as we get to later overnight, and winds will quickly begin to diminish. But man, talk about strong winds that are going to move in the next couple hours. Let's talk about the deep south. These storms are moving through these sections right now. The question is, how much does this kind of retain itself as we're getting into later in the morning hours into the afternoon hours? Look at these storms quickly moving. The storm motion's a little bit slower, but these storms begin to move out of Alabama. We're going to focus on these deep south states. We're already talking about Tennessee. Begin to move into Alabama, I would say late morning to around lunchtime. They blast through Huntsville, potential for damaging winds, maybe a quick spin up. But look at all this kind of scattered and smothered, if you will, convection bubbling up over areas of eastern Alabama and North Georgia. We watch for any discrete cells that can get going up here in North Georgia. If they can get going, if they can mature, they will have the chance to produce a tornado and certainly damaging winds. They will have the chance. We'll stop it right here, and in fact, we'll just go on and flip it. Let's keep it here. We stop it right here, and you see all these little kidney bean looks right here that you have. That tells me that those storms have that little hook that we talk about, and this is just a broken up embedded line and maybe semi-discrete supercells. So you want to watch out Chattanooga, watch out Northwest Georgia, watch out Eastern Alabama, Western Georgia. These are blasting through, and I mean, you got to be careful. And you look at the significant tornado parameter, guys. It gets really high around midday in Alabama. I'm talking about 9, 10 readings. This doesn't mean there's a 10 out of 10 chance or anything like that to see a tornado. It just means that the ingredients are there for tornadic potential. Okay, that doesn't mean you pretty much are guaranteed to see a tornado in all these areas you see in white and purple. It just means the ingredients are basically there for tornadic potential. Okay. This moves into Georgia. I mean, by early afternoon, you have some pretty high-end parameters right here on the STP parameter here, right? So you got the ingredients there. It's just, do you get any kind of mature cells that really get going? Okay, the wind's very strong. Not as strong to your north, but I mean, just a huge corridor of strong winds moving out of North Mississippi throughout the entire state of Alabama, 40 to 50 mile per hour wind gusts. You get into North Alabama near Huntsville, you could have 50 to 60 mile per hour wind gusts. It gets very windy in Atlanta sometime this afternoon. And very windy times for sure. Now, my folks here in the Carolinas, I've had people, man, you got to focus more on us in the Carolinas. This is where you started. I agree. We're going to break it down for you guys. So, we're getting into this afternoon. The storms are beginning to move already into North Georgia. They're beginning to knock on the door here in upstate South Carolina. I would say 24 hours ago, the convection was looking very pitiful. It didn't look like there was going to be much at all. But now you have some broken up cells. Now the tilt of these storms begins to shift more southwest to northeast, if you will. But the storm motion slows down. So basically, you're lacking a little bit of forcing, but based off the latest model information, And you can actually look at the 10Z now, based off, and it didn't change much. Based off the latest model information, these do look like they could produce. And there's some higher elevations. Look at these storms right here near Hendersonville, North Carolina. They try to slide into that 85 corridor, Greenville, Spartanburg areas, and you got to watch out. A little bit later around dinner time here in the upstate of South Carolina, even into the foothills of North Carolina. Heck, watch out Southwest Virginia. Things like the spin up here too. There's a little bit of a threat here, and there'll be a little bit of a boundary somewhere up in here where basically winds are coming at two different directions, and they could put a spin to the atmosphere. So I would not be surprised one bit if later this afternoon, really this evening, you get a couple spinners up here as far north as Virginia. But watch down here in upstate South Carolina, the Piedmont foothills, the kind of the triad of North Carolina. These could spin. Now, once you get deep down here in Georgia, you're lacking a lot of forcing. I don't think storms are going to mature much in Georgia. And central to southern Georgia is what I'm trying to say. Northern Georgia could be a different story. But I really think that these storms could maintain strength and maybe wash the pollen at least away for us for here in Columbia, South Carolina, Charlotte, maybe even Raleigh overnight tonight. We definitely need it. The pollen is insane here in the Carolinas. Can't speak for everybody, but here in the Carolinas, it's pretty bad. But I'm telling you, the tornado parameter here, it gets pretty high. In areas of upstate South Carolina, eastern and northeastern Georgia. I mean, heck, even for you folks, getting in and around Charlotte, but it really begins to drop off. But, I do think on the southern extent of this, there is a tornado threat. But, sure enough, they're gonna update the Storm Prediction Center right when I drop this, but it is what it is. I gave you the disclaimer that it's probably going to happen, so you don't have to tell me, Mitch, you're wrong. It's a 10% risk of a tornado now. I know. I'll try to throw the link in there when it happens, but the winter weather side of this, guys, Chicago, you just got a winter weather advisory, but a couple, you go just south, winter storm warning, where you could get a quick hitting 6 to 8 inches of snow stretching from, northern Indiana all the way through southern Michigan. Even 2 counties in far northwest Ohio have a winter storm warning. So let's break this down really quick. And, I'll talk about the Northeast really quick too. The winter storm warning's up for the Northeast, but really just interior areas. In fact, the entire state of Vermont, winter storm warning. But Boston hanging on to winter weather advisory criteria. We'll see if this changes. Winter weather advisories, in Buffalo. But let's break down the upper Midwest. Huge shield of precipitation will move in. This is likely snow falling where it shows rain in Chicago. When I tell you, and this is for today, about early mid-afternoon. When I tell you there's going to be a strong cutoff between snow and no snow, I mean it. And when I talk about a cutoff, I mean that it's going to go from nothing to absolutely unloading some kind of precipitation. In this case, on the northern extent of this, it'll be snow. I'll stop this here. It's going to be absolutely ripping snow, probably from areas of like Illinois right into here, just south of Chicago, through northern Indiana and southern Michigan. I'm talking about 1 to 2, maybe 3 inch per hour rates. And this is going to be heavy, wet snow. I mean, considering the fact that you got severe storms maybe down here in Ohio at the same time where you have winter weather falling like maybe 2 hours to your north, heavy winter weather, it tells you how dynamic this is. But corridor very heavy snow just oozes into the Chicago metro area. But this is very heavy snow as I stop at around 5 p.m. falling from eastern Illinois through northern Indiana through southern sections of Michigan. Detroit, this could be one of your biggest snows of the winter. And then, it could begin to mix a little bit with some rain, maybe some sleet in Detroit as you get later in the evening hours. And then this might switch back to snow. And then it heads on off. By the time you're waking up Saturday morning, the storm's over. And then we're left with a swath of maybe 3 to 4 inches of snow here in kind of eastern, northeastern sections of Illinois, just south of Lake Michigan. You're picking up maybe 6 to 7 inches of snow. But once you get into southern Michigan, guys, I mean, Detroit, they're going for 4 to 5 inches of snow. But once you get into southern Michigan, widespread 9 to 10, maybe 11-inch snowfall totals. And I know you're thinking, if this was a 36-hour storm, that wouldn't be a lot. But this is going to fall in about like a 12-hour period. So it's going to fall in consistent 1 to 2 inch per hour rates. It's going to unload heavy, wet snow in this area. It just tells you, really speaks volumes to the dynamics of this storm. So just know that, yes, you guys are used to snow up here, but it's going to fall at a very heavy rate. It's going to be blowing around. Yes, heavy, wet, clumpy kind of snow. Definitely not a dry snow. My folks up here in the Northeast, as you're getting into this Friday afternoon, an area of winter weather will begin. Do you have like a thumping of heavy snow in areas of Buffalo to start this off where it shows the yellow? I think it's possible. But whoever gets thumped by this front end area of snow could have 1, 2, 3 inch per hour rates possible. I'm talking about Syracuse, Watertown, up here to the northern country of New York State, even into the valleys and the Adirondacks and central sections in the Poconos, places like these higher elevations can have a really solid thumping of snow. Where you see these pinkish colors, that is sleet. That's why you just have winter weather advisories down here in kind of northern sections of Pennsylvania. But the heavy snow begins to take over most of southern New England. I'm talking about Boston, really, as you're getting into around midnight. Heavy snow falling in Connecticut for a period, in Massachusetts. But this stays all snow up here for most of Vermont and New Hampshire. Heavy snow just north of Boston falling at around 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. And this continues, but look, the models have turned a little bit warmer for Boston. You're switching to rain tomorrow morning in Boston, and then you might switch to a back-end thumping of snow tomorrow afternoon. And then this heads on off, and then by the time you get into Sunday morning, this is a done deal. And you're left with maybe a couple inches of snow in Boston. You could get more than that. You really could, but it's a tough call. But the interior areas of the Northeast, this is where most of the snow is going to fall. There's going to be a corridor of heavy sleet that falls somewhere in here. I know I'm just circling a weird area, and I'm not really circling anything. I'm just moving my cursor. But someone's going to get some sleet here in northern Pennsylvania, southern sections of New York State, Connecticut, areas of Massachusetts, and Rhode Island. Someone's going to get maybe an inch of sleet. I think it's possible. And then you look at the freezing rain totals. A glaze is possible, but the freezing rain has kind of trended down, which is good. Nobody likes freezing rain, but that's all I got, guys. Stay safe out there. There's a lot to talk about going forward as we try to figure out this pattern, but stay safe. For my folks in Kentucky, Tennessee, the South, praying for you guys. This is going to be a quick-hitting system. You're not going to know it's coming if you're not aware. So be aware of what's coming for you folks. God bless all y'all, and I'll talk to you soon.